My name is Judy Carter.
Tell me, what is your date of birth?
May 4th, 1940. I was born at the Elizabeth Hospital across the street from the park.
This interview is for the Prairie Grove Oral History Project, and we want to be sure that we have your permission to reuse it.
Yes, you do.
Thank you. Who were your parents?
My parents were Joe and Mary Sue Carney Jones.
And tell me about your family, your siblings.
I have one brother and one sister. My brother lives here and my sister lives in Fort Smith.
Okay, and tell me about your family's business when you were growing up. Where did they live and what did they do?
Well, my father worked for the highway department, and that's about all.
Okay. Tell me about your earliest memories of Prairie Grove. When did you come to Prairie Grove and what do you remember about it?
When I was a small child, we lived with my grandparents while my father was in the Navy. And we came to town on Saturday, usually, and we lived at Hogeye.
Okay. Who were your grandparents? Tell me about them.
Claude and Nora Carney. My grandmother told me a lot about Prairie Grove back when she was a girl.
Can you share some of those stories with us?
It was mostly about the park. Her dad was Robert Owen Hanna. He was in the Civil War in Tennessee, and he came to Prairie Grove in 1867. And they lived south of Prairie Grove. And she told me about the Confederate reunions they had. He was in the Confederate Army. And they would come up here and have a reunion. They came in wagons. They slept in wagons. But he and his wife had a house here in town. So I don't know if they ever stayed in a wagon or not. But it was like a carnival, the way that they presented the...
Tell me more about these reunions. What all would they do?
Well, she said it was like a carnival. They had things like that.
What do you remember about the town when you first started coming to Prairie Grove? When would y'all come to town and what would you do?
Well, we came to town usually on Saturday, and we would buy groceries and go home, but I always looked forward to coming to town. It was a fun day, and later on, in later years, I came to town on Trades Day that they had in Prairie Grove. I always enjoyed that.
Tell me more about Trades Day.
Well, you had tickets. You put in a box, and they would draw out the tickets to see who won. And I think, if I remember right, the prize was $50 for the first prize, and then so much for the next few.
Tell me about going to school. Where did you begin school and where did you finish school?
I started school in Prairie Grove in the 8th grade. I graduated from Prairie Grove High School. I was a cheerleader in school, and I enjoyed Prairie Grove. I was in the band. Clyde Delap was a band leader, band director, and
tell me about when you started, what did you do after you got out of high school?
I went to work for the FBI in Washington, D.C. I stayed 1 year. I came back to Prairie Grove And Delford Reef offered me a job in the bank. So I took the job, and I was just planning on staying a year or so. And I ended up staying 50 years and retired from there.
Tell me about what it was like to work for the bank all those years. What was it like in the beginning, and then how did it change over time?
Well, before, in the beginning, it was you did everything by hand. No computers, no nothing. Adding machines was about all. When it ended up, everything was all computers. But I know when we first went to computers, we were all scared we wouldn't be able to work with using the computers.
What year did you retire? Tell me about when you retired. And
I retired in 19, and I never can remember for sure what year I retired. Somebody asked me that the other day, and I couldn't tell them. But I think it was 1996.
So that was before the Arvest merger?
No, it was after the Arvest merger.
Mm-hmm. But the name was still Farmers and Merchants?
The name was still the Farmers and Merchants Bank.
Okay. Tell me about when you used to come to Prairie Grove to shop. What were some of the stores you would go to, and what do you remember about them?
Well, we came to the Crescent. We went to the Southern Mercantile and the dime store on Main Street. And the dime store was up 2 buildings from the bank. And I just remember going in there a lot.
When you were a kid growing up and when you lived with your grandparents in the Prairie Grove area, what did you and your friends do in those days for fun?
Well, we were out in the country, so I didn't have too many friends that lived out there. There was a boy that lived up the street from us, or up the road, and he would come down and we'd climb trees. And he always helped me climb trees. And that's all I can remember about that.
What would the adults do back in the old days for fun?
Played cards.
Tell me more about that.
On Sunday afternoons at my grandparents', after lunch, we would all go to my grandparents' for lunch. And the men would play cards. And I would go watch them play cards. They played pitch.
What would the women do?
Cleaned up the kitchen, and then we'll go sit down in the living room.
And the kids that were gathered there, what would they do?
Well, we would watch the men play cards or go outside and play.
Where did your family go to church, if you did?
First Baptist Church.
Tell me about what that was like when you were a kid going there.
Well, it was the old church. It was a white building, had a stove in the back where it was heated, where it heated the room. There was a bell tower. Our Sunday school classes were upstairs by the bell tower. Florine Cornwell was my first Sunday school teacher up there. Her husband was Ray Cornwell, who was principal or superintendent of the Prairie Grove schools. And
Tell me, let's go back to the battlefield park. Tell me everything you can remember, your earliest memories of the battlefield park.
well, we would have reunions. My grandmother's family would have reunions. And we would go to the park. And I guess that's where she told me a lot about the park. We would go down to, she was a relation to the Morrows that had the Morrow house. And she would tell me about going to their house. And the kids would spend the night on pallets around the fireplace down there. Anyway, that's what she would tell me a lot about.
Talk about how the park was pretty small at first and then gradually changed over time. What do you remember about that?
I remember the tanks being here, and not much of anything else was here.
Do you remember when they moved in the...
Yes.
Tell me about that.
I remember when they moved in this building, when they moved in the Morrow house, and we would always go up and look in the Morrow house and the ladder barn.
Do you remember when they started the clothesline fair? And
Yes, but I don't remember who started it.
how have you been involved with helping the park?
Well, I was in the Junior Civic League. I was a charter member of the Junior Civic League, and we had our meetings in Heineman Hall, right after Heineman Hall was erected here. And then later on, the Junior Bank Board, I was a sponsor of the Junior Bank Board at the bank, and we would, on Memorial Day, we would have a hot dog stand and sell hot dogs and drinks to the customers to the people that came to the Memorial Day events. And we always had some kind of a speaker at the Memorial Day events.
What other memories of Prairie Grove do you have that maybe I haven't thought to ask about?
I remember the railroad tracks being down south of town. They crossed the street close to the mill. And my grandmother told me that they went to the World's Fair in 1904 in St. Louis. And that's what they got on the train down at the depot south of town. And I don't know when the depot was demolished or what, but of course it wasn't there when we came to town. But I do remember the railroad tracks before they took those out.
What are some of the other changes you remember in Prairie Grove?
A lot more businesses, flea markets. I'm sure there's been lots of changes I can't think of right now.
Let me ask you this. If someone said, Judy, tell me about your hometown of Prairie Grove and what type of town it is and the people, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that it was a very small town, but the people were really nice people, and they worked together to make the town better.
Tell me about the Battlefield Commission you're on and what you do on that board.
Well, we usually meet once or twice a year and discuss buying merchandise for the park and anything else that we need to discuss. There are, I think there's 6 of us on the committee. Susan Park Spencer is on there with me too. Cindy Whitehouse, Pam Parks.
Have you enjoyed being on that commission?
I've
Tell me a
enjoyed-
little bit about it.
I've enjoyed being on it.